residential flats being built, and whereby it incorporates a floor of co-living space so that people who chooses to work from home more often can have that collaborative space, and they don't have to work outside and go to their office, and so that they can get their human interaction from the co-living space that is provided within their flats. That's the possible future that we're looking at. And so based on those different behavioral changes, what we want to achieve from this topic today is to understand what are those issues, what are the short-term, medium and long-term implications of the pandemic towards urban cities. And so, before we continue, just a brief introduction on INKI Association. We are an association filled with Indonesian professionals and academics based in the UK and some based in Indonesia as well. And what we want to do is bridge the gap between practitioners and academics within the built-in environment to make sure that we can share knowledge and make sure that we can raise issues and challenges within the existing environment for us to be able to improve the infrastructure and built environment elsewhere globally. So the program for today, I know we're running a bit late, but we have a 5-minute introduction just now, and then we're gonna move to Melwin, our first speaker, in which he's gonna speak for 20 minutes, and we'll move on to Abraham and Shayna. Each of them will speak in 20 minutes, and then we'll move on to our question and answer question, which will run for 20 minutes as well. And then before we finish off, we have a bit of poll to ask people what they want to see in our next webinars. So I would like to welcome our first speaker, which is Melwin. Melwin is a senior designer at Arab Singapore at the moment. For today's presentation, he's gonna talk about urban strategies in response to a global pandemic, whereby he will share his perspective of how city planners respond to urban issues triggered by COVID-19. That will lead us to be able to define the bigger picture and create the bigger question of how is this pandemic actually going to form urban future. So Melwin, I'm going to give the floor to you. Melwin, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see my share screen?
Yes.
Cool. Thanks, Icha. So good evening, everyone, and good afternoon for you all in UK. Selamat malam buat rekan-rekan yang ada di Jakarta, Indonesia. So my name is Melwin. I'm a senior designer in our planning team in Singapore. I'm a master planner by profession. So, okay, this evening, we want to talk about urban strategies in response to the global pandemic. I realized that the theme is pretty broad as I provided this title back 3 weeks ago to INKI, but it's fine, I think, because this big title really helped me to reframe my thinking about these issues and will help us to discuss something more specific along the discussion later. So thanks again for INKI and team for organizing and giving opportunity to share my thought in this event. I hope the digital help us today. Oops. Cool. All right, this icon has been there for about 3 months in my SharePoint page when I log into my laptop in the morning, every morning in the last 3 months. And on the first week of its life, I access it frequently. But then I just realized that I probably haven't clicked that for almost a month until a couple of days ago, when an internal email directed me back to this link to settle some stuff. So it's just like becoming a reflecting moment for me, the way I see this crisis as well. You know, mix of tense and concern at the beginning, and then until a point that you barely remember if this COVID-19 problem exists. What I will share this evening is a curated material from various sources, argument and opinions shared in this discussion will not lead into an answer or solid recommendation. But my hope is we can help to get the right question to planning for a better future post this crisis. So please bear with me in the next 20 minutes. Oops. Okay, I will just flick through the coming slide just to refresh our mind a bit on trends of how COVID-19 shaping our daily life. It's not moving. All right. Lockdown means less economic activities, lead to the empty roads, almost zero industrial activities. This satellite image from NASA prove that our sky is cleaner during the pandemic. This is not only happened on top of China. I believe that I saw once on top of Italy as well. It's showing the same story. And then the calming of the city activities is not always a good news for everyone, especially for little people. I have 3 little kids, so I understand the life is not even easier for them, as they can reach their favorite rides at local park to channel their energy. And this is a common thing that we see lately. Never before, I think, we saw this physical and digital realms in our time been extremely juxtaposed and clashed in the massive global scale. With the digital infrastructure at this time being has enabled everyone to work from home. And then it's not surprising us that Zoom dominating the real physical connectivity tools or infrastructure, in this case is airlines. Okay. The good news stories about COVID-19 lockdown is basically we can see from all over the world, we can see that extraordinary community spirit. In Indonesia, it's common to see a speedy initiative to help communities to cope with the crisis. I read the same from UK. Here in Singapore, voluntary action to help the vulnerables has been initiated since the beginning of the crisis. Okay, cool. Oops. So if we look broader, if zoom out ourselves a bit, the deeper facts trigger this shock to our urban. So based on the data, 95% of the COVID-19 cases are registered in the cities. Then this leads to economic crisis led by the response measure, including lockdown, or in Singapore we call it circuit breaker, which later intensifying vulnerabilities that exist in our communities. So I think that's why any discussion about city planning or city-related discussion has become more meaningful these days. Cool. As life will be different, at least for the foreseeable future, we witness communities, designer, planner, and architects globally coming up with such tactical urbanism, a good initiative. And we see that social distancing is an important mantra in the city life at this juncture. So in every part of the world, we see that people implement the safe distance measure, though it's not the same in terms of the distance in every part of the world. And then this image just reconfirm again that people or human being cannot live without without social interaction. In different cities, in different contexts, people implement social distancing in different way. In the left hand right here, you can see that as practical as traditional market expansion into the street, or something more thoughtfully designed in this image here. And we can see that the smart and digital infrastructure become play bigger roles in the community to help with the social distancing. In Singapore, government utilized their IT infrastructure to inform people of crowd level in the park or in a mall. So this is really helpful, basically. So you can decide before you head out to your park or to buy your essential stuff. And then this is a good initiative from New South Wales Planning Department on response to the social distancing culture in the city. I believe that based on this diagram here, the cafe culture is become strengthened by this reaction to this COVID. We can see how people start to rediscover the streets by landscaping, traffic calming, prioritizing cyclists and pedestrians, that make it easy for shops and cafes to spill out into the public highway. But then, it's a bit lagging. What does this social distancing strategy mean for everyday life? Above all of the sporadic innovative or ideas bring out by the planner, designer, and communities to respond to the challenge by this virus. But I think the bigger question for us as a planner or designer, urban designer, raise along the impact of the core of our cityness. So I had a chance because the impact of this virus or crisis is quite broad into our community. There's a lot that we can discuss. So I had a chance to do a catch up with my colleagues in Indonesia, Singapore, and Australia basically last week. What are the question is simple. What are the most relevant issues for you associated with the city planning recently? So the output is was quite expected. As you see, density, transit, and mobility are on the topic. Not saying the rest are not important, but this is one of the biggest reason why I want to dig more about this area. So the rest of the presentation after this, we talk more about density and it impacts to the urban strategies. So where do we start? I did a quick desktop research and found this tweet of New York mayor implicitly mentioned that the spike of corona case in New York caused by the density level of the city. Whether the writer or the reader misinterpreting the message, but it's already generated a big support, or people trying to create a contraindicative evidence of what is the relation between the COVID spread with the density of a city. As it's happened, we understand that our city will double in size by 2050. So will it faster or will be slower due to this crisis? We don't know the answer yet. And most important things, this is trigger a question again, the way of our thinking about our city model again. This image is basically, represent the idea of, are we going to build up or build out of our cities? This is trigger a lot of question. Really, the ideas of sprawling city that planner against for the kids rising back, or the efficient right density mixed use are still on track after COVID. I just try to imagine. I try to imagine this whether low density, low productivity car dependencies area will become the future model again, or I'm not against that, but I mean we need to really understand and be careful about our decision and understanding the social and economic impact behind that. Okay, here is basically just to give a bit of context to defining the right question on the city density and the strategies. So before COVID-19, the Property Council of Australia come with this 10 trends factor. Global winning cities are managing these factors basically. But then we are questioning whether the situation at this point impact or change these trends. What is the driver of change, and then which themes accelerate or decelerate? For example, a simple one, economic transition. Will we see more manufacturing in society? Will the ideas of superblock or mixed use thrive? And then if you look at the area of urbanization of jobs and capital, how COVID will affect urban economic? Is decentralization really the solution? And then, of course, technology change is going to be quite obvious to our city. So these all of the 10 themes that keep raise the way we try to achieve to a really good and competitive city. Again, to give a bit of context, I got this insight from my cities leader in Australia of how Greater Sydney envisioned to shift from divided city structure that leads to bigger problems caused by inefficiency of transit and city density. So at this chart, we can see that the Greater Sydney is growing twice as Greater London. In simple say, we can look that 9% edit per hour in Greater Sydney. If we look deeper, the highest, this is the two maps analysis that showing access to knowledge jobs in Greater Sydney, and also the mapping of Sydney effective job density. So the highest proportion of knowledge jobs and professional services related jobs concentrated in the CBD. Concentration of jobs have begun to form in around key centers or in the western area. But if you look at this map, this also explains public transport gap as quite evidence in the western part of the Sydney. And then if we talk about the effective job density, it's basically an index that's showing the level of employment to the relative to their to the time that they taken to access the employment. On CBD, again, with higher density, has the highest level of job density in the whole city, on the whole Greater Sydney. And then if you look at these maps, at the left-hand side, they call it gross value added, GVA, reflecting the same that CBD also top in this category. So gross value added is a measure of income generated by business in terms of profit and wages paid to the workers. And then this map analysis, based on this map analysis, saying that 25% of all Greater Sydney income was generated around the CBD. These two maps here in the right side, the divided structure of Sydney, interestingly, not only dividing the people, but it is making some communities ill due to the lack of walkable urban precincts. So the maps here showing the diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular disease in Sydney basically overlap closely with the maps of low density and poor public transport access. And before COVID, basically right before COVID, I think last year, Sydney have a vision to change these inequal outcomes by increasing effective job density. So they need to do some strategy to include improving their accessibility to the location of high jobs value. And then, of course, again, density become more critical for them. So they will increase urban density around these jobs by providing more housing in terms of choices and on supply. This is need to emphasize. And then, of course, another thing is create more concentration of innovation district. Oops. Okay, so all right. So this map showing different approach of analysis, but again, if we back to New York, the data shows the same story. We leave the problem of economic disparities and social gap into the city of New York to the mayor. But what this map really tell us, the economic agglomeration on productivity are overlapping with the density of the area. So, okay, so can we really imagine if we leave the dead CBD and keep it empty for the next 12 or 18 months, cafes, restaurant, hawker center closed. If we talk about mobility, we can spend an hour to discuss the impact of this crisis to our transport system, how to rebuild the trust, demand management, and then leave alone the business case. But we are not going to explore those further now. But at least as a planner, I think we're aware that public transport is the fin of our city. We understand the concentration of cities need agglomeration, and it need mass transport to support it. This is okay. This is we understand that the crowds is the critical ingredients of a city. So the image here, basically the night view of a street near to my workplace, a favorite place for people from the surrounding area to hanging around and chatting, especially on Friday night. In adjacent to this is a favorite hawker center in Singapore. So this area is crowded every day and night. It's just hard for me to imagine if this street without the crowds. What is the impact to economic? What is the impact to the socio or culture of this area, and to the tenants and to the surrounding areas? So as we're talking about Singapore, this is the plan of key growth areas by 2030. Um, we can see initiative to decentralize the economic center by creating next CBDs. Jurong here was the closer target before, just before the postpone the high-speed rail project to KL. And then we have Changi here, will be the core at the eastern end. And then in the woodland and north area, traditional industry and logistic are being revitalized to become an advanced industry. Those are the vision and the direction that cities bring toward a better future before COVID. The current shutdown of the global economy, I think, just become reminder for us that human interaction in dense urban environment are critical. Urban designer has a dream of creating city in a campus where you live in the middle of everything to create such a, they call healthy classes. Change of ideas from people from different group, different profession, different background, social and economic, would only happen in a city with a crowd. And with the mix with the right of mix of uses in the area, in the denser area. So a healthy and well-planned dense area where the healthy classes happen is the big reason for the high knowledge and innovation economy evolve. So again, there's the discussion about density. What is our question that we should ask to proceed forward? What is next for us? If I took this quote from arguably the most innovative man of decade, the way he's standing is he looked from the standpoint of probabilities, and then from there he start to take some action, whether from that perspective there's opportunity to accelerate or slow down another thing. If you look at this, so this is basically the way what he said in a simple graphic. So this is the simplified evolution of the system, a structure analysis of the future. So from this diagram, we need to see again where we are now. Are we in a solid foundation to move forward? What is the problem? What is the implication? And what changes needed? And then from there, we can decide what is the right action needed. So as we talk about the growth of our cities again, we understand that indeed the cities will double by 2050. But is this still the future that we want? And then look at this map. Model shift is required to make city to be more productive, to be more livable, healthier, and equitable for everyone. The image of this between Atlanta and Barcelona compare the emission of low density car-based city and high density mass transit-based city. So the difference, if you look here, the difference is striking. It is matter in health and socioeconomic terms. So, and then the difference also symbolize the key strategy question for the city to be answered by the government or by the policymakers. Or shall we, as a planner, urban designer, architect, or engineer, moving forward with the agreement to build a healthy, sustainable communities in a compact development? We need to consider again the decades of work and advocacy between designer, planners, and policymakers about the benefits of urban living and density. So this is the right time for us to reflect on what matters in the cities as we enter the post-COVID period or era. So just a bit of reflection and closing slides from me. I think it's time for us to bouncing forward. People's agreed SDGs are become more relevant today. The pandemic has entirely exposed fundamental weakness of our global system. It has shown beyond doubt that poverty, lack of health system and education, just intensifying the crisis. And then if you look at this recent publication by Arup, can we accelerate building our path to this balanced biosphere where humanity and Earth are thriving in harmony? We are witnessing a globally government policymakers has critical roles to play to reactivate our city and economic by promoting great initiative. In some case, like in in Paris, they use this opportunity to accelerate the great initiative before the pandemic. So from Paris, Singapore, from Liverpool to Bogota, the government take initiative and took this opportunity to bounce forward. So coronavirus is a massive threat. We understand that a massive threat to all plans and system. It breaks people's desire for social connection, which is critical for a city. But as we emerge from our lockdown, planners, designers, engineers, I think has a stock of opportunities to create a better world. It is a moment to reimagine systems of production and consumption, how we design, how we live in our lifestyles, and then again reconsider what is the basic right for the people in the cities. And as closing statement from me about the regarding the density and CBDs, I think there is no modern economy can run or become wealthy without the CBD jobs to help the city and the nation. Of course, we can live more locally, work from home, but I think our current economic model, the core of that, has clustered around physical form, not a virtual. So I think that's all from me, Aicha. I hope it's clear and you enjoy it.
Thank you, Melwin. That's great. Before we move on to the next speaker, which is Abraham, can I just remind everyone, in terms of questions, you can ask questions, and please just fill it in our Zoom group chat. If not, if you're watching from YouTube, what you can also do is fill in the comment section, and our committee will select the questions that you've asked. And if you're in Zoom as well, if your question is chosen, what we'll do is we will unmute you later on at the Q&A session and we'll allow you to speak and ask your question. So we're moving on. Thanks again, Melwin. We will move on to our second speaker, which is Abraham. So Abraham is the corporate township operations at Lipo Karawaci, Tangerang. What he's going to talk about today is saving the heart of a city, delicate urban fabric, to a powerful local urbanization. So what he's going to do is focus on the impact of the pandemic towards the relationship between cities, the urban core, with these suburbs, and how this relationship can actually be stronger as an impact of the pandemic in the future. So Abraham, if you want to take on the stage.
Okay, thank you, Cha. Is this already full screen or?
It's not full screen yet.
Let me.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about saving the heart of a city, delicate urban fabric to powerful local urbanization. I currently work in Lipo Karawaci, specifically in the Township Operation Division. Lipo Karawaci is a property developer in Indo, and our scope of work are landed or township and high-rise in the context of residential property management. To illustrate some of our projects, the townships shown here on the left side are in the suburb part of Jakarta. One in the west is 1,000-hectare Lipo village, Karawaci, and in the east is 3,000-hectare Cikarang. Lipo is also currently developing a hyper-dense development, Meikarta, and the last two images show high-rise mixed-use areas such as St. Moritz in Puri and Kemang village. So if you look back to the 1920s, many people at that time had their own ideas of what the future would look like. Harvey Corbett, Renzo Picasso, or even Le Corbusier are some who had grand vision on the future of cities. Today, but none of the images shown here are realized today. Our cities today are totally different from what they imagine. This is also another person's idea on the future of Dubai, with many more Burj Khalifa and other skyscrapers. But I think this idea will most probably not going to happen, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. I think the most influential book for urban planning is this book by Jane Jacobs, published in '61. From beginning, Jacobs really provoked the resurrection of good city design. Just like Melvin did, I believe today a lot of students and urban planners still cite her work. Starting from that era, Jacobs' era, the urban studies field started growing rapidly. Cities get their life once again. Many projects happen in a city, along with the growing population. The discipline gets more complex and holistic. We are starting to use technology to model and analyze cities. And the language of the city that was very mathematical, such as angle, proportion, scale, now are being added, such as permeability, livability. And I think today we believe that cities is one of the greatest manifestation of human civilization. But this is now the reality. This is an image of Jakarta during coronavirus, an empty city. So cities actually are very prone. And it is hard right now. I got some information from my colleague in the high-rise division that the usage of electricity and water are decreasing. Facilities, gym, swimming pool, spa, the perks of the high-rise living are actually now closed, and people in the high-rise are surrounded by many public furnishing elements that are used together. For example, you want to park your car in basement. Basement is an enclosed room, and then going to lift, you go through a small enclosed corridors, and then we encounter with lots of object that has been touched by many times beforehand. And because of the government act of PSBB, everything is done from home right now. Work, study, pray, play from home. Park, entertainment, and mall below their unit are closed. Moreover, with the ability of current technology, such as Zoom, people will able to continue this behavior even after PSBB ends. The residents itself are kind of being locked in their own unit. Yet, they are still have to pay their maintenance or service charge fees. As a result, some of them are going back actually to their parents' house. So really, it's a drop in occupancy. And for the building management itself, the mixed use lost up to triple-digit million in a day. But pandemic is not the only factor that can shift built environment. I noticed there are other 5 phenomena. The first is war. The second is prosperity or economic driven. And then a natural disaster like earthquake or tsunami. And the fourth is zeitgeist and a pandemic itself. So let's go back into the 20s where people have dreamed of the future. So here is the sketch of the Renzo Picasso, the multi-layers infrastructure for cars that he dreamed for the future. But then just 30 years after the sketch, right after the World War II, the idea of living in city is vanished. People choose to develop and move to the suburbs and abandon the imagination they previously had. Then right after that, the city try to come up with urban renewal scheme, urban redevelopment to bring people back to the city, but already with a different knowledge. Compact city that derive from efficiency, arise, permeability, and focus on people right now is the language. The left one are focused on the cars. The right one, although it is the same multi-layer, is focused on people. So from this slide, we can learn two things actually. One is the prediction of what the city look like often do not happen. When we see today is different than the prediction was made. The disruption create notion of people coming back from urban core to suburb. From the industrial revolution, as the second industrial revolution in 1800 create an epicentrum for people to come to the city. But then after war, it moved people to suburb. And then with the new zeitgeist, it attracts people again to come to the city. Now the question is, will this pandemic move people back to suburb? So this is an article from LA Times 2 months ago. It says that the sprawl may have saved lives, but this is highly criticized by an architect who may represent all of us in here. I agree that suburb closely identify with unwalkable neighborhood, in efficiency, time travel, and high carbon footprint, huge infrastructure cost, and most of the cases, the suburb is just a dorm for people just to sleep. But the suburb, which is often scorned, is actually performing pretty well in the current situation. People are coming in and can do their activities. Our income or revenue increase double-digit %. We are getting more feedback from the residents. The usage of water is also increased 25%. The food delivery in our township increased 100%, so it's double. Just only two things go down, but actually indicating a good performance. There is outstanding or AR, it's only plus 1%. And the residents movement are down 25%, meaning that they are comply with the government order to stay at home. Perhaps this is why people are moving back to their landed house in the suburb. Suburb offers something that urban core cannot offer. It enables people to still enjoy their time in this time of lockdown or PSBB. They have a backyard for gardening, they got enough space and sunlight to work out. Playground inside the cluster is still open and controlled, where in the urban core, residents cannot do anything because everything is closed. And suburb residents still can do a lot of things. Furthermore, in this PSBB, residents' appreciation to one space are unfolding. For example, let's say in the backyard, which is used to fish feeding, but then now a lot of residents are do hydroponics and aquaponics. So because of the pandemic, we now rethink all again what is all about these two. Each of urban core and suburb have types of homes and neighborhood. But often we forget that the heart of both urban types are actually human or people. So as we know this, for the purpose of this presentation, I will focus on suburb. So maybe we should see this as a nexus nexus between people and suburb, and nexus between urban core and suburban. Maybe both have to learn about each other, talk with each other. Maybe recycle is the concept of local urbanization that each type should learn from one another. I remember that Winston Churchill said that we are shaped by our city. This is maybe the same concept. People are shaping the suburb, and then the suburb also shaping the people. And the infrastructure itself, maybe the urban core and suburb is also have to talk and you know uh, take the good of each and left the negative. And maybe we have to wipe out the binary between these two and starting, the new with a new viewpoint to achieve the true resilient human habitat. We bring back the good of the suburb to the core and vice versa. The good thing about urban core, the good thing about the strong point of suburb. So we combine these two good things about each areas. So this is actually the theme of my talk, delicate urban fabric to powerful local urbanization. These are the toolkit I devised to address this issue. The first one is I propose focus on intensity. So P is planning, O is operation. So in planning, maybe we don't need high FAR. I think we just need more proper variation of amenities, and we provide a solid temporal dimension of a place and create multi-use of townships. So not just a mono or a single use. So in the operation, maybe we should give people multiple or more choice of transport and walkability. So the second one is localized functionality. So in the planning, maybe we have to have a right proportion in terms of amount between residential and commercial. So not to have too many residents but low or a small commercial area, and not too big commercial and low residential that will hurt the township. And also maybe right distance of autonomy areas. So maybe we kind of create the 20 minutes neighborhood that everything is provided in the area. So we don't need to move to another neighborhood to, let's say, if we look for a snack or something. In the operation, maybe we need to trigger local activities and amenities, such as we create local stores, local park. We can start from a very small cluster, or each RT. Just 2 hectares is enough for a walking distance as well. So the third one, the last one, is flourish hidden asset. So in the planning, maybe we have to save land bank as a checkpoint and sandbox, creating flexible temporary nodes in case of we have another issue. And in operation, maybe we need to refresh and strengthen current nodes with a more decent or proper hygiene features. For example, there is a children playground in every cluster that maybe have to be provided with a sink or hand sanitizer. So saving the heart of a city, delicate urban fabric to powerful local urbanization. Thank you.
Thank you, Abraham. Great presentation. Thanks everyone who has been submitting their questions as well. We will review them during the questions and answers session. Before that as well, we'll move on to our last speaker, which is Shayna. Shayna is a grad urban designer at AECOM London. What she's going to discuss for today is the global outlook of post-COVID cities, whereby she's going to identify the problems within cities that have been created during this pandemic, and how is that going to change urban design, the principles of urban designs in the future. So Shayna, you're free to go now.
Yes. Hi everyone. So I'm gonna share my screen. Can you guys see it yet?
It's not out yet.
It's not out yet. Okay, give me a sec. Now?
It is now.
Is it?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So thank you for the introduction. I am going to talk about the global outlook of post-COVID-19 cities and how it could potentially affect the way we design, maybe forever. And I'm going to start with probably the most common question that I get asked since I started studying urban design in uni, just as a brief introduction. What is urban design? A lot of people don't know. And urban design is essentially all about problem solving for urban areas. You basically start by taking this urban area and summarizing the main constraints and opportunities that is relevant to the area and extracting a set of problems that you will try to somehow solve through your interventions. And the way we do this is often through creating a set of visions and objectives, such as, for example, ensuring a walkable and connected urban environment by creating integrated network of green spaces, or say we want to create vibrant streets and local retail, and we do that through encouraging active frontages. But beyond just fixing up the urban fabric itself, urban design is actually about looking into the socioeconomic issues that is often felt by the communities of that area. And so we hope that the interventions would transcend just the physical realm and actually improve the lives of the people who live there. And as we all know, hopefully, the current problem that's faced by most urban areas right now are the problems that are a consequence of the global pandemic from COVID-19. And this is not the first pandemic in the world. So pandemics actually have a history of disrupting and altering lives in cities and communities, and cities are usually forever changed because of them. And what I've personally noticed is that there is a duality to the change, to the waves of change in social, economic, and political environment across the globe because of this current pandemic. And the first layer of that, being the most obvious and direct change, is the changes in lifestyle that happen so abruptly. Like we have to social distance ourselves, social isolation, we have to work and study at home, and we can't leave too far from our houses. And the second wave is the less obvious one, which is more of a change in behavior where it affects how people travel, because before we used to have limitless bounds, both in the air and on the ground, and now we have to rely on walking or cycling if we don't have cars, and the way people use public space. For example, before we want to actually be in crowded spaces, and now we actually avoid those crowded places like a plague, almost quite literally. And also changes in the way we interact within our communities, like with our colleagues, with our neighbors, with our friends. We're now relying on telecommunications as opposed to relying on physical spaces. So without a doubt, many of the prophylactic measures introduced during lockdown have led to these changes, and it challenges the very essence of how cities function as a whole. So this should in turn alter the way urban designers aspire to change the city in the long run.
I think Shayna is disconnected.
Okay. Shall we give it like a minute or two? If not, we can jump to the question and answers first before she comes back in. Hi, Shayna, are you all set up now?
Hello, sorry, I'm not sure what happened. I can't share my screen anymore as well because screen sharing is disabled.
Okay, we can help you with that.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. Give me a sec, sorry.
Hope everyone's doing well, by the way, to everyone out there in the world.
Shayna, can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can. Is that my screen? No,
That
okay.
is my screen.
Okay, I'm gonna request. Okay, hope this is running smoothly now. Sorry again. And so whilst it is too early to say what the post-COVID-19 normal would look like, we should take this actually as a positive opportunity in order to create good changes in our built environment, which a lot of cities around the globe are actually already looking to do, which is really good. And from that, I'm gonna summarize some of the key priorities that many cities around the world are trying to put at the front of the urban design trajectory at the moment. And the first one being championing the outdoors, second one reclaiming space from cars, and the last one is revitalizing local independent shops. So championing the outdoors, there's this quite famous urbanist magazine called City Lab, and they've asked people from all over the world to create these maps of their lives to share their experiences under lockdown. And a consistent theme that was found in a lot of the drawings are local parks and leafy streets. This is especially true in high density cities where people have smaller flats. And in most of the drawings, buildings actually seem to disappear and fade away to reveal just the actual streets that they experience, gardens, and parks. And for example, like this drawing from someone in Texas, and it maps their route to the park from their bungalow duplex. And they said that it's the journey is just as important as the destination. And it's obvious that the journey is the park, which probably means that he goes there often. And a lot of the elements of the map basically shows outdoor activities such as cycling, walking his dog, and etc. Another one is from someone from Bolivia, and the map shows their immediate neighborhood and how they've noticed a lot of changes in the outdoor environment of their neighborhood, where there's less noises, less pollutions, and they can even start seeing animals landing on their balconies, birds singing, and the streets looks much cleaner. So there's been an improvement in the outdoor space during COVID-19. And, oh, sorry. And another one also is from someone from Italy, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen the videos on Facebook and on Instagram where people in Italy are going out their balconies and singing to their neighbors, dancing, working out together in rooftops, and they've actually rediscovered a sense of community during lockdown through their private outdoor space that they have, which is actually quite significant. And this idea of how outdoor open green spaces have benefits is not a new concept in urban design. It's actually very common already previously, and it's very supported by the science on biophilia and its myriad of mental and physical health benefits. But nowadays, I feel like more people feel the effects of it, and personally I do as well, because without the parks near me, I might go a little crazy by now. And so, But the big problem is these quality outdoor spaces are in reality very scarce and not a lot of people have access to it at the moment. Like, for example, we could take the city of London, which is where I live. And London has 800 square kilometers of green space. It's actually the third most green major city in Europe. But if you really properly look at those green spaces, only 26% of them are publicly accessible, which means that the rest is owned by private people and it's not actually shared with the others, like their private gardens or their backyards and etc. And this actually segregates the opportunities to access outdoor space for the low-income communities and the higher income communities. But a way that cities can look to alleviate this segregation is through a method called urban acupuncture, where you design small tactical interventions within the built fabric, which has the potential to make a big impact. And these sort of interventions are especially effective at the local and neighborhood scale. Like, for example, in London, they've reclaimed some public outdoor space by creating the small public pockets park in Hackford Road. It's called Van Gogh Walk. And it actually has some history to it. It's actually where Van Gogh used to live. So it's got some heritage and it's close to the hearts of the communities. And they've used this space for school children nearby to play and for the lower income residents to have some connection with nature and the outdoor space, because most of them obviously won't have the luxury of a garden when they live in such a dense and expensive city like London. But a lot of the times people would think that, this is only possible when the local authorities have a lot of money to implement such interventions. But in reality, urban acupuncture works really great because even the local communities themselves can be the ones to implement these. Like, for example, in Jakarta, a local street in Kebon Kacang, which is an urban village that's pretty much low income, stuck in between all the high rises and all that, they took what little budgets they have within their own community to improve their local streets by planting these trees. And so it's a very simple intervention and it's very simple to execute, yet it still brings about all the benefits that comes with having quality outdoor space in your vicinity. But beyond the public realm, as I've mentioned before, in the case of Italy, where the lockdown rules were even more strict, private outdoor space is actually also becoming much more of a priority in many cities in the world. Like, for example, if you've been to Canada and the city of Vancouver, you'd realize that it's a very dense city and they don't use urban acupuncture or pocket parks to provide their communities with public open space. They have larger central parks, such as the Central Park in New York, where they make places dense and then make big parks next to it. And these big parks are not always accessible by people in times of COVID because it might be too far and they need to rely on public transport and whatnot. So the former chief planner of Vancouver actually said, quote unquote, that the two most obvious things this pandemic has revealed in the little details of city living are sidewalk widths and balcony depths. This pandemic has basically shown that balconies serve a much greater purpose than just increasing market values of developments. And like in Italy, they've actually become platforms for community resilience and social connection. And so what the former chief planner did was he tweaked the city's bylaws to incentivize bigger balconies, whereby the reformed rules are to now only to allow developers to expand the amount of exempted balcony space, only if they could show that they could increase the quality of the development in either one of these three aspects, but not exclusively: the home's livability, the building's architectural interest, and the property's green performance. So if the developer does not provide larger balcony spaces, at least this would result in much better residential developments as a whole. So those are the two ways cities around the world are starting to champion outdoor spaces. And in that spirit, Another way they're doing so is through reclaiming space from cars. And I think this answers Carlos's question in the comments before. Sorry, it's lagging. But yeah, this is probably one of the most common trend in urban design right now amongst the cities as they try to recover from the pandemic, and actually during the lockdown itself, because there's a timeliness to this where they start with temporary measures that are quick and more efficient, and then eventually they hope for these to be permanent. This right here is like a typical residential neighborhood street in London. And taking London as an example again, the transport in London currently, the way people travel pre-lockdown, I mean, 35.5% of Londoners use public transport, which is the biggest chunk of it. 37% owns cars, so private motor vehicles. 25% walked, and only 2.5% cycled. But as we know, like, public transport is a big no-no right now. And so the logical situation for the City of London and many other cities in the world is to invest in pedestrian and cycling infrastructure for use during lockdown and for use after lockdown. So some of the temporary measures include road closures, speed restrictions, pop-up bike lanes, and widening of pavements, especially to make sure that people follow the 2-meter social distancing rules. And the Mayor of London and Transport for London, the company, have recently created this London Street Space program, which they aim to rapidly transform London Street to accommodate a possibility of increasing cycling by 10-fold and increasing walking by 5-fold, even after lockdown restrictions have been eased and people can start using public transport again. But they've pledged a £2 billion fund to boost such activities. And London is actually not the only place to do that. This has been done in France, where 116 towns and cities, including Lille, Dijon, Saint-Étienne, my French is not the best, but they plan to build temporary cycleways for the duration of the lockdown and for the few months to follow after lockdown. And meanwhile, as they're doing this temporary, they're working on a more permanent solution by bringing forward the publication of the new National Cycleway Guidelines, which is the best practice guide published ahead for May 4th. Sorry, the presentation is really lagging. But this is what they aim for most streets to look like in London by increasing street furniture, cycleways, having shared pavements, and increasing Santander bike docking stations, cycling parking, to increase the amount of cyclists in London. And in Paris, these are the temporary cycleways. They're adding 650 kilometers of cycle lanes. They're calling it the pop-up Corona Cycleway. And another city, actually from a developing world, in Bogota, Colombia, they're also aiming to create this scheme where they're opening up their 22-mile ciclovia network, like their cycling network, which is a system of streets that are normally closed on Sundays, and they're trying to close it for other days of the week during lockdown as kind of a temporary test to see if they can do this more permanently after. And this is like their version of car-free Sundays in Jakarta. I'm sure you're all who live there are very familiar with it. It's along the main avenues between Tamrin Place and the National Monument. And so thinking about how it would affect traveling and how it would affect traffic in other ways if they actually closed it down all days of the week instead of just Sundays. And hopefully this would increase the amount of cyclists and change the modal share of transport uses. So this sort of temporary urbanism is also not new to the urban design theories. It's a very quick and efficient way to show the community the advantages of proposed interventions. And when the community see that it's actually a good thing, they actually like it, and then it starts becoming more and more permanently ingrained in the urban fabric. So urban design is kind of half about changing people's mindset, but also half about taking into consideration their needs and trying to create like a positive feedback loop out of it. And in the long term, like the good thing about increasing walking and cycling is obviously it curbs climate change, it increases public health, which we all know is the main concern right now. So in the long run, when you have a healthier community, it would ease pressures on health services, which are the backbone of the human race currently. And it can also lead to, this is a more unknown advantage, but it can lead to economic activity in local high streets. So local high streets are known to be dying a little bit in many metropolis. And as social distancing eases, people can start returning to local shops, cafes, and restaurants in persons. And bicycle use is actually a proven stimulus to economic activity, especially on main streets and commercial streets, because studies have shown that cyclists spend on average 3 times more than car drivers with local businesses, and they tend to interact it more, especially when you're walking. And having cycling infrastructure on the high street itself is actually already correlated with higher retail sales overall for that given high street. And this actually leads to my last point, which is revitalizing local and independent shops. Ironically, as chain restaurants, bars, and especially larger shopping malls in Jakarta, for example, are first to close during the pandemic. So during lockdown, they're the first one to close down and not allow any more customers. But the last to close and the hardest to be hit are the local independent shops. And the death of the high street is also already a common concern in urban design and in many cities in the world. Local independent shops close down and all of that. And these are often replaced by larger developments, chain stores, shopping malls, and etc. But this also happened before the pandemic. It happened when there was a change in consumer behavior where people started buying things online and relying on delivery rather than going and visiting the high streets themselves. But with the COVID, as we all know, we're only in cities where we don't own cars. We can only access shops and stores that are within walking or cycling distance within. So this has caused a resurgence of local loyalty, where the local high street has started to becoming its own again, because a lot of corner shops or bodegas are actually better stocked than markets now. I don't know if this was common in Indonesia as well, but in London we experience stockpiling, where people start buying things in panic because they thought the world was going to end. And so a lot of toilet papers have gone missing from the shelves, and the corner shops and bodegas actually have them, and people start visiting them more. And beyond that, small independent businesses are also being pushed to find new ways to sell and promote their products, whereas before they weren't motivated enough to join the online shopping trend. Now they are kind of forced to, because their physical selling space is closed down. So they're forced to open up a shop online. And so this incentivizes them to sell their products online. Okay. And as urban designers, the way we can help the resurgence of local businesses and independent businesses is to creating the physical space that would allow them to thrive. And this includes, sorry, it's pausing so much. This includes creating a new streetscape for those high streets, such as covering parking lots with parklets that have been turned into benches with trees, and also adding more seating for local bakeries or cafes. so people can start congregating in these high streets and making it more of a public space rather than just a means of passing. And for a lot of the businesses, it's actually in reverse. It's not that they had a physical space and then now they're going online. A lot of them actually did not have a physical space to begin with, and they saw this COVID-19 as a chance for them to explore their passions and start something online. And so how do we take that surge in the online economy where they start making shops on Instagram, and how do we provide a physical space for them? And a really good way to do this is by creating a new platform, such as the trending pop-up markets that we can see anywhere in Jakarta, in London, for example, is very common. And so that would allow them to ensure success even after COVID-19 is over. And it would allow them to expand their businesses as well. Okay. But overall, as also mentioned by the other speakers, putting all these points together, it's a matter of creating a new neighborhood where it's more dense, and putting all these pieces together and designing a new neighborhood that would allow space for all these new changes to coincide and create a better community as a whole. And yeah, so hopefully we can take these as positive things, the problems that are coming out of COVID, and create better spaces within cities. And thank you. Sorry for all the technical issues.
That's okay. Thank you, Shayna. So it's just a summary before we open the question and answers section. And thanks a lot for those who have asked their questions. If I can, please invite Melwin and Abraham as well to start turning on their camera. But I think Shayna's last presentation has created a really great summary for us today, because from the current themes that have been discussed is cities are key for civilization, which means that even after the pandemic, the new normal is not, we still need cities at the end of the day. And then also mentioned how currently there is already been an issue even before the pandemic, how cities are actually centralized, as Melwin said, and how it is currently unhealthy. It creates health issues because people are not walking as much. And that's also creating a much more bigger distance for people to travel and mobility wise, in which that is also raised by Shayna, how like now from the pandemic, there is issues with mobility and how people are now focused on cycling and walking at the same time, which means that they can't travel as much. And that leads to the need of decentralizing economy. And like as Abraham said, the idea of 20-minute cities sounds much more attractive now, because especially with the rise of cycling and walking as well. So right now, let's bring in the